I'm here at Motorola inside their lab holding a brand new Motorola Razr phone, notable for the screen folding in half. And while the display might be the star of the show, it's this hinge that does all the heavy lifting. And we're gonna take a close look at what makes it up and what makes this phone fold in half. Hey guys, I'm back here at CNET after my tour of the Motorola lab, and it was really impressive being there, I'm not gonna lie. Not only did I get to see the phone itself, which was the highlight of the day, let's be honest, but I actually got to see all the little pieces that go into making the hinge, that go into making the chassis of the phone, the glass for the little belly button camera. It was all really cool. I kind of wanted to see if I could put them together to make a phone, but they wouldn't let me. That being said, I also got to see all the tools they use to torture test the device, like dropping it, dropping things on it, opening and closing the hinge. Fortunately, they wouldn't actually let me run any of those tests myself, but they were impressive nonetheless. But let's just talk about this phone. This phone has a lot of things going for it. It has nostalgia, it has a small size, but really it's all about that foldable display. And the foldable display is only as good as the hinge mechanism that supports it. So let's say we're going to design a phone and we have a paper-thin foldable display, like this piece of paper. If I want the phone to fold in half, I can do that, but the problem is I now have a giant crease in my display. Probably will have damaged it as well. Another option would be to take the same display but not fold it completely flat. So maybe 2/3 of it's flat, but it leaves this little bit of an, I don't know, little air pocket here, kind of like a teardrop shape. And what's cool about that is if I go to open it again, I don't have a crease, and I can do this over and over again. Now, the challenge of this is, what are you gonna do with this teardrop shape? Huawei has a neat thing they do for their foldable phone where they actually put the display on the outside of the device. So that allows the body of it to stretch the screen out. So it's constantly being taught whether it's closed or open. Motorola took a completely different approach. As opposed to putting the display on the outside of the device, they put the display on the inside of the device. Not only does this allow the phone to go from a normal size shape to a pocketable shape, it also helps protect the screen. And as we know from the Galaxy Fold and some Vids debacles, these screens are very fragile. So how do they make a hinge for this? So if you think of hinge like a door hinge, the whole hinge is solid. And if you put a display in there, it's just gonna crunch it. What Motorola did is they actually made a small cam system for the hinges on either side. This allows a gap for the display to live in. And when it's closed, you don't see that gap. And as you open it, you see a taut flat screen. Now, if only it was that easy to engineer, and it definitely wasn't. And that's where Motorola's parent company, Lenovo, comes in, where they had a very similar style hinge on their Yoga laptops. So who'd have thought a Yoga laptop and a Motorola Razr would result into this really cool looking foldable phone that we have today? So at this point, we've solved for the crease in the screen, we've solved for how the screen opens and closes, but we don't have a lot of support for the screen. And that's where the next part of this hinge comes in, and it's using stainless steel plates. The stainless steel plates are actually, some of them are actually glued to this display, and others of them are standing freely. It doesn't go across the whole back of the display. In fact, there's probably 1/3 of the display that is just free, and that's where that bend's going to happen. So the hinges have to do two things, right? It has to strengthen and stretch the display when it's flat, so it's like a normal phone, but it also has to get out of the way of that bulge again. And so to do this, there's a spring cam system. Yes, again, we're talking about cams. How crazy is that? My very non-scientific way to describe this is kind of like knuckles. So if I cross my fingers like this, and I open them like this, the top of my fingers are relatively flat. And that would be the open position of the phone. But as I start to close my knuckles, you can see there's a gap in between them. And that's where these steel plates are getting out of the way to hide the bulge of the screen. All the metal for the steel cams and steel plates are made of hardened steel. They're also covered in a diamond-like coating. This allows it to move back and forth, so that way you're not using like lubricant or anything in there, because no one wants that. In fact, as you open and close your phone, if you look very closely at the hinge on either side of the screen, you can not only see the flex of the display, but you can also see the gears of the cam as they move back and forth. We asked Motorola about this, and you could cover them up, is what they said, but it would just add another thing that would have to move and not fail. And by showing you the mechanism with which this phone opens and closes, it looks kind of cool. It's kind of like seeing a watch where you see the gears underneath the face. Another thing to look for as you open and close the phone is the bottom of the screen. In fact, the whole screen's moving as you open and close it, and you could really see that at the bottom where the chin is, because you can see the screen move ever so slightly back and forth in and out of that gap there. Okay, so aside from the cams, aside from the steel plates, aside from the display, there's also power lines that have to go through. So in fact, there are 80 different signal lines that go through the hinge, as well as power between the two battery halves on the top and bottom of the phone. All of these things have to move in synchronicity every time you open and close this phone. So that's when I say the display is the star of the phone, but the hinge is really doing all the hard lifting. For more about the new Motorola Razr, take a look at our first look video. Also check out CNET.com. We have a bunch of stories, including interviews with the executives. We have unboxings. We even have a hidden Easter egg where you can actually use the original Motorola Razr V3's keyboard and phone dialer on the new one. Yeah, pretty cool.